right. Hello, hello. Oh, so good for you to join me today. I am glad that you are here. I just did this on Facebook, and I think it went okay. And so I thought I would do this for the YouTube crowd, probably more for the Twitter crowd, for those of you that don't have Facebook. So anyway, I am glad that you're here. A couple of things that I want to say up front. First of all, I am not a professional. I do a lot of sort of this type of thing for a living. I do a lot of client calls. I do a lot of sort of these Zoom kind of meetings, that kind of thing. And so I'm comfortable with my setup, but I also don't, I wouldn't call myself a professional, but I have had a lot of people over the last week or so ask me questions about my setup and video and how to do these video setups. And so I thought, well, why don't we do this? Why wouldn't it be beneficial for me to just sort of like, instead of do this a bunch of times, let's just take and share what I do know and invite any kind of feedback. If there's something that I gotten wrong, I would love to, I'd love to be called out on it. I'd love to be corrected and that kind of thing. So what I'd like to do, the purpose of this video in particular, is I specifically want to do some very high-level thoughts and ideas about best practices for live streaming, just some things that I've discovered, some things that I've figured out, and so I thought I would just share them here. The other thing I want to mention too is that, whenever you're talking about live streaming, there's a plethora of options. There are all different kinds of ways that you can go with this, and they can get really complicated. They can either be really complicated or really simple, or there's just all sorts of things in between. It's a lot like a choose your own adventure book. There's these series of choices in your face, and you have to, do I want to go this route or do I want to go this route? And if I go this route, then there are these other choices that I have to make. And so really, it ultimately comes back to what, when you step back and look at it, it looks like a maze. And it can look a little bit complicated, but it really is just about following each one of those things and saying, which makes the most sense? Which choice do I go? And so I'm going to talk about a number of different things. I figured what would be most beneficial, I think, is to talk about all of those considerations, to talk about things like what platform to use and why, what are the pros and cons of each one, why you would choose one over the other. The other thing that I would talk about is things like, software. What software should you use and what makes the most sense? Community engagement. How important is that in terms of consideration? The equipment that you use, the bandwidth consideration, things like operating system. So what are you actually trying to accomplish with the stream itself? So there are a number of these things that I think are worth considering. And so I'm going to go through each one of those, present them to you, and then kind of allow you to go from there. So at the very least, if you can go away from this having a sense of what to Google, like that to me is a win, right? Because a lot of times you don't even know how to ask the question. At least that's the thing that I struggled with. And just quick backstory, I recently, and I'll share this link in the description, but I recently on my blog, plasticmind.com, I wrote about my setup, and I just started using a DSLR camera, a Sony a6000, as my webcam. That's why you've got nicer quality here. So I started using that setup, but before that, I have a Canon 5D Mark II, and so I wanted to stay in the Canon family, so I tried an M50 and all of this stuff, and it just did not work out well. And it took a long time, and I just didn't even know how to search for these answers to these questions. So we're going to talk about a lot of things today. Hopefully, even if you don't get all of them, you'll at least you'll get familiar with the terms, so that when the time comes, or if somebody has a question, you can point them in the direction that will give them hopefully some help. Okay. One other thing is, let's talk about setups in general. Okay. So on the one hand, you've got small setups. And when I'm talking about live streaming small, I'm talking about taking something like your phone, your smartphone, and setting it on a stack of books and recording yourself doing a Facebook Live or a YouTube Live video. I think those types of things are fine. I think it's great. As a matter of fact, I would even go so far as to say that the simpler setup is sometimes a benefit, because what that means is you're more comfortable with it, right? There's not a lot of moving parts. It's just you put this thing in there and you start talking and you communicate what you need to communicate. And to be honest with you, like today's Sunday, my church did a live stream, and I know a lot of churches were, and I kind of hopped around a couple of them that I know, and it was interesting to see. There were some people that did the very close, very personal sort of presentation, and then there were some people who did more, kind of formal. And I think especially in this day and age, the more intimate, the more sitting down face to face is number one. I think it's what people are seeing. I mean, I don't know how you're talking to people. Like I can see my family and I can hug on them, but a lot of people don't have that. And a lot of people, the only way they're engaging with people is like this, face to face, through FaceTime or through Skype or Zoom chat or something like that. And so in a lot of ways, people, this is like the normal for how people are engaging, not necessarily standing on some stage behind a pulpit or something like that. I think just, again, however you want to do it, having a reliable setup, being comfortable with the setup, that reliability and that comfort level is far more important than quality. That's my argument. And a good I think proof of this is if you'll remember the video that came out of, I guess it was last year, maybe even, where the guy was on CNN and he was doing an interview and his kid came in the room and the mom ran in and pulled him out and stuff. And and we all laughed at that and we're cringing a little bit. But I think the thing that jumped out at me and most of the responses that I saw was like, we're human. It's okay. Like, your kids come in. Sometimes the cat will walk in front of the camera. I'll never forget. Like, I remember being in a conference call with a really serious meeting, and in the background somebody had forgotten to mute, and a horse whinnied over like the loudspeaker in the room, and it kind of broke the tension, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, we're human beings. It's okay." So all of that to say that don't discount a small setup. Because, again, reliability, comfort level are far better than quality here. Other end of the spectrum, something much larger. So like a multi-camera setup, fading, overlays, those are great. And there's a place for them. I won't talk about them tonight. And the reason why is because if that's the kind of thing that you need, you probably already have a team advising you on this. I suspect that most people probably fall somewhere in the middle. Specifically, maybe they're doing some kind of a live stream for a conference, for a work meeting, a business meeting, maybe a church service, something like that. And they want to step it up with a better camera, maybe better audio, or they want to, and this is a really legitimate one, they want to switch between multiple sources or screens. So in other words, like not just my face, I have another thing that I want to show. And so being able to quickly and easily switch to that can be challenging for people. And a lot of people are asking, how do I do that? So we're going to talk about that today. So let's dive in, first of all, and let's start talking about platform. So when we talk about, some people ask, like, well, where should I be doing this? Should I be posting this to Facebook? Should I be posting this on YouTube? Should I be, even when I did this tonight, to be honest with you, I did it on Facebook Live first, but then I was debating, like, do I do this on YouTube as well? Like, how does this work? So there's this like question about where does it make sense for me to put this? And so I think the easiest answer to that question is, where's your audience? Because it ultimately is about discoverability, right? So think, how would people know about this thing? Some people like to, for example, they do all of their news for their organization or their company they're doing all of that on Facebook, and so it makes sense for you to do a Facebook Live because that's where most of your people are. I know that there are people who have a much larger following on YouTube. Again, those are probably people that I'm not talking to as much, because if you're already on YouTube, you probably already have a decent setup. But again, this comes back to where will people be looking for this? The other thing I wanted to mention too is that you can easily pull down, like you can record this on YouTube and then download it and upload it on Facebook. You can also download it from Facebook Live. You can save it and then you can re-upload that over to YouTube. So I think, I wouldn't get too hung up about that. The only time I think that matters most is when you're talking about something like, when you're doing something like a live stream, because then it's really a matter of like, well, where's the community going to be? Because I want to hear from them. We'll talk about community engagement and how that matters when we do that. Now, you might be wondering, like, some people want to go live on multiple platforms, and you can. There are services like ManyCam that will allow you to do that, but I think there are a couple reasons why I tend to steer clear of that. I think number one is it makes it harder to monitor community reactions, like people submitting questions, people joining, people liking, people, sometimes, especially with live stream, that's really important to get that feedback to, you say something that isn't right and people clarify it and you get a chance to kind of have the back and forth. That's really, in my mind, that's the beauty of something, live stream. Some people do pre-record it, and we'll talk about pre-recording in just a little bit and some of the pros and cons there. I think it's harder to monitor community reactions. The other thing is I think it's you have to consider bandwidth limitations. So I had a friend that just did this recently that broadcasted using something like ManyCam. And the problem was you're pushing out to multiple services. So each service, you're pushing out a stream. And so that comes with a bandwidth cost, right? So you essentially have half the bandwidth as you're sending to two services, because video is pretty heavy in terms of the bandwidth cost. So I think most people, especially if you're broadcasting from home or you're not doing like an industrial sized broadcast, I would probably encourage just picking one platform and then doing, uploading it to the other platforms that you think people would find it interesting or be able to, find it there. Let's talk specific platforms. Twitch. I think that some of you might be familiar with Twitch. Twitch is for a lot of YouTubers, or not YouTubers. A lot of Twitch streamers do it for video games. Like they'll be playing a video game in the background. There are a lot of Twitch streamers who are like, they'll have green screen where they're like their heads kind of floating over here on the left-hand side, and then they've got like a chat stream where people are like. And they'll even have stuff related to the video game that's being put up on the screen. So there's a lot of neat things. If you want some inspiration about how to do live streaming well, check out Twitch. I would say that probably most people, at least that I'm talking to, are, when you're talking about like a conference session or a work business presentation or something like like a church service, I would say Twitch is probably not the right platform for that. YouTube is probably good if you've got a strong following on there. I know some people do, but it doesn't surface live as well as Facebook does. So in other words, if I'm publishing something and I'm posting it live, it's far more likely to show up in somebody's news feed than it is to show up on Facebook's watch this video next. It's hard to get into that because there's so few, whereas with Facebook, there's a lot more real estate on your news feed. So if you have a strong following, consider doing it there. But generally speaking, one of the other things I would encourage you to, if you've not done it before, sometimes they require like a 24-hour activation. So if this is like you're going to be presenting Sunday morning and you like fire it up Saturday night, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Like, I got to wait 24 hours. So just a consideration. So Facebook, one of the other things I want to mention on Facebook. So Facebook, if you're sharing a live stream on a public page, people who don't have a Facebook account can still watch it. I know I've had some people say, oh, why put it on Facebook? I don't have a Facebook account. It doesn't matter. You can still watch a stream as long as it's on a public page, or it's shared publicly. The other thing is that I've known some people that have put stuff on YouTube and then shared it to Facebook. But the problem is Facebook depresses those kinds of posts. So Facebook doesn't usually like to show links out to other sites because they're trying to promote internal traffic. And so that's why like a Facebook Live, way more people are going to get engaged with that than if you're posting like a YouTube video or something along those lines. That really has to do more with like the Facebook algorithm and that kind of thing. And it's a whole nother conversation, but just something to keep in mind. The other thing I just wanted to call out is that embedding can be really helpful. So some of you might have just websites that people go to all the time. If that's you, congratulations, that's awesome. And you can often like embed those streams. Maybe actually, here's where it's a great scenario. I know like some organizations will like sell tickets to an online webinar or something like that. So they'll have like this landing page that they're promoting with their marketing materials, maybe on the front page of their site, they're throwing to this video, or sorry, this page. And so in doing that, they're driving traffic there. They're getting Google like to rank that and to put it in their search engine pages, search results. But the other thing is they'll sell tickets there as well. And so they might have like a little Eventbrite thing where they're selling things. And then what you can do is you could actually literally just swap it out and put an embedded YouTube live stream there. I think Facebook allows that. I can't remember if you can embed a Facebook live stream. I would love if somebody had correct me on that one if I'm wrong. But you can, but again, it's another consideration of where can people find this? How will people know where this thing is? And so that's one of the key drivers when it comes to figuring out, which platform do I use? What makes the most sense? Okay, let's talk a little bit about software for a moment. So there are a couple ways to do it. If you're going simple but a little bit more advanced, like if you're going super simple, you're using your phone, you're using YouTube's app, you're using Facebook's app. Fine, no problem. You can do a similar kind of thing on your desktop. So you could, for example, I could bring up Facebook or YouTube and I could just go live and I can use their software, and then I can, basically tell it, this is my camera, use this microphone, and then you start broadcasting. And that, again, that's relatively low lift, relatively straightforward to do that. Where you run into problems if you want to start like sharing your screen, or you want to do some more complicated stuff where you want to maybe have like a video that you're sharing, or like additional media sources. And so there are ways to do that. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Before I do, I want to mention that there's a couple of other platforms that you can use. Like you can use Zoom and Google Hangouts and FaceTime. Those are a little bit more for like private meetings. Not necessarily. I've been doing some remote co-working where I basically spin up a room and then I share that link and anybody who wants to can come in. And so now it's much more for like interaction. And so I'll have everybody that joins, or most everybody that joins, comes in and I can hear their audio. I can see their video. Zoom does have like a webcast kind of thing, but I think it's limited to like 1,000 people, which probably is not that big a deal, but it is a paid plan, I believe. So just a consideration there, if you're doing like a private thing where you're not live casting and you're not live broadcasting, that might be the route that you want to go. So for example, I talked with somebody who's doing like an Alcoholics Anonymous or one of those kind of community support groups, and they don't really want that broadcast live. That's not the point, but they do want to hear from everybody. So they were trying to figure out what's the best way for everybody to be able to join together, see each other and talk. And so that's more like a Google Hangouts, Zoom kind of a thing. There are different requirements. I think, for example, Zoom has a limit on their free account is like 40 minutes max, something like that. So if you have to go longer than that, you'll probably need to get a paid account. It's not super expensive. You can also, I think they have limits of like 100 people, 150. Google and Zoom are comparable in that way. Again, if you're just doing like a family thing, even just like FaceTime groups is probably fine. Probably whatever's easiest, again, is going to go back to that's the best. So I'm going to show you this software called OBS. And OBS stands for Open Source Broadcasting Software. And basically what it lets you do, and I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, but basically what it lets you do is it lets you register sources from your computer, and these sources can be anything, mix all of those sources together and create different scenes. And you can create multiple scenes that you can then quickly switch between. And so these sources can be things like your webcam, they can be your microphone, they can be your desktop audio, they can be, images, they can be colored blocks, they can be text. So essentially just things that you would normally drop into, let's say, a Word doc or something, when you're editing, those are the kinds of things that you can register as sources in addition to the multimedia, like your video and your audio. And so what I'm doing with my OBS is I am broadcasting from OBS out to YouTube Live right now. And what I had to do is I had to go to YouTube Live and I had to basically start up a new live video. And then I could have used the camera, as I mentioned before, but instead what I did was I switched it and I said I want to do a stream instead. And so what happens is YouTube gives me a stream key. And then what I do is and I'm actually going to share it now, I'm going to switch to a scene in OBS that shows my desktop. So it's going to get a little bit trippy because you're going to see my OBS, which has what I'm seeing as in my live video, but then you're also going to see a little stream of like the YouTube, what's going on in the background, okay? So don't freak out. Here we go. I'm going to switch to a picture-in-picture, okay? And a couple of things are happening here. First of all, you can see that my image is down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I've got a cool little purple border around it. Yay. And then I have OBS in the middle of the screen. I'm going to actually make it a little bit larger, and we're going to get real trippy here for a minute. See that? Check it out. So basically what OBS is doing is OBS is broadcasting four things, okay? My Sony a6000, which is that camera right there. That's the source. It's broadcasting my Rode Podcaster, which is Rode's USB microphone. It is broadcasting a square rectangle, purple rectangle right here. And that's like something from Tron or something. I don't know. So there's that color source. And then we've also got the iMac, which is my background desktop. Now, as you can see from the stream, I've got scenes that are defined here, okay? The first scene is blank. So I'm going to click that, and I think everything will go away. Okay, so we had just a moment there where everything went blank, and it was because I had no sources defined for that. So it was basically just blank. Now, I have another one in this Sony a6000. When I click on that, you're not going to see OBS anymore, but you'll only see the source. So now you'll see my Sony a6000, and you'll see the Rode Podcaster. And I'll switch back to the screen because I wanted to get back to what I was mentioning with live streaming from YouTube. So when I share from YouTube, you can see I get this stream key, okay? And basically what I do is I copy it out of here, and then I go into the settings, and you'll see this YouTube option here, and right beneath that there's the stream key, and I drop in the stream key, and in a nutshell, what that's doing here, for those of you that are tripping out, I'm going to switch it back. Okay, so basically what that does is when I take that stream key, I then talk to YouTube, and I say, hey, YouTube, this is the stream key that I am. And then on the YouTube side it says, cool, we're listening for that, and we know that you typed in a title and a description, and so now we know to match those sources up. So I basically, there's a button on OBS. You can see it right here on the right-hand side. Actually, my face is covering it for your stream. Let me move it out. There you go. So I've got this, now it says stop streaming, but basically I click start streaming, and all that does is it pushes it out from OBS to YouTube. Okay. So that begins the streaming process. No, I almost clicked that. If I click that, this would be over and done with. So I'm going to switch this back to the A6000. Okay, now, so that's the gist of it, okay? And you can go real simple. That's probably the best way to start it. But one really common scenario for a lot of people, whether it's a church service or for like a conference, is they'll want to... a lot of times what they'll want to do is they'll want to have like a slide where they're showing things off. And that seems to be the thing where people get hung up a little bit and need to like figure this out. So what you can do is I actually, as you can see, I've created a scene, and the sources in that scene are my Sony A6000, my Rode Podcaster, and then also Keynote, which is my presentation software. And I'm going to bring that up now, and you can see I've got my slide defined there, okay? Oh, and there's something else here. Do you guys see my eyes right there? So this is my Sony A6000. This is my Sony A6000, but I've cropped it. So there's a little secret when you're using ABS. You can actually press Option, and it lets you, it doesn't resize it. So again, when you drop in a source, you can put it wherever you want it to. So I could put it right here. It doesn't make sense because I'm covering most of the text of the slide, right? But if I put it, I put it like in a corner or something along those lines, I can then, press Option or alternate if you're on the Mac or on the PC. You can drag that and I can resize it because again, I don't need to take up all that space. I can just like put myself, because I'm just a talking head here, right? So that's a much better experience for this. And then what I can do is in the background, again, you're not going to see this because I'm selecting windows in the background, but I'm going to actually switch to a different slide. So now I just clicked to a second slide. Whoops, that was a bad positioning. Okay. But again, I can drag myself around if I want to. So one important thing to note here, the thing that stinks about this is that it is kind of faked a little bit, okay? And what I mean by that is this is cropped. If I uncrop it, you can see I'm actually just taking the whole window in, right? And so when I switched slides, I was actually just clicking on another slide in that little navigation slide list on the left-hand side. And so I just click on that and then it switches it. It's fine for most cases. If you want animation, it gets a little bit trickier because you can't, if I click play, for example, it takes over the whole screen. And we don't really want that. We don't want it taking over the whole screen because then I can't control OBS and I can't get out of this. If that's all you're presenting, fine. If you don't want your face or if you want to leave it that way the whole time, no big deal. But if you are going to be switching OBS, there's a couple of options that you have. Number one, you could use a second screen, and I believe there are there are apps specifically for your iPhone where you can, or even Android, where you can tap on those scenes and it'll register those scenes, and I could switch scenes using this, which is kind of nice because then this is nice if you need to present your desktop or your screen. So it can be really helpful in that regard. I am going to resize this. There's one other thing that someone when I did the Facebook, by the way, I didn't mention this before, but you can resize these as well. So if you wanted, for example, you could go like this, and you can make that thing really small, and I could take and I can uncrop this. There are easier ways to do this, I think, but you can essentially resize this, and you're like, oh no, where did my presentation go, right? But no fear, I can basically set the ordering, and this again works. You probably can't see this, but I can actually change the ordering by right-clicking on the source that I'm looking at specifically, and I can say, just like in any sort of editing software, I can say move to bottom, just like you would in like PowerPoint or Keynote or something along those lines. And so if I wanted to create a second scene where my slide was smaller here, I could do that. And then I could switch between that and then the legit one, right? Like I could easily just boom, 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 pop between the two, depending on what needed to be prominence. If I really needed to call attention to that, I could switch to that scene and vice versa. So where this gets a little bit tricky, and I don't want to go too far into this, but I want to tell you some things that will at least get it in your head so that if you need to Google it, you're more informed, because that's where I got hung up. I didn't even know what to look for. You may want, a common scenario that somebody has asked me a lot about is, I want to bring someone from Zoom and I want to display them on the screen at the same time as I'm on the screen and I want to hear them. Okay, so where this gets tricky is that you need to capture your desktop audio. And you can do that. There are ways to do it. Like I can click plus in OBS and I can add that as a source, right? So if I switch, I'm going to switch to the picture-in-picture, so brace yourself again. So I can come in here as a source and I can click on the plus sign and there is an audio output capture, and you can technically connect to desktop audio. But where it gets tricky is you generally need to feed the audio from whatever it is you're trying to capture into a different speaker. You can't just pass it into your earbuds or your headphones or whatever you're using. You'll need a way to feed that into OBS, okay? And so there's this tool called Soundflower. There are a couple of other options, but Soundflower is a pretty common one that basically shows up as a microphone, or sorry, as an output. And so, for example, I'll show you in my system preferences. I can set my headphones right now as my audio output, but I also have this Soundflower, and I can basically send audio to that. But then what you have to do is in your OBS, when you're adding that source, sorry, it's even tripping me out. When you add a source, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to say Spotify. Let's say I wanted to capture Spotify's audio. Then you would capture it here. So you would need to send the audio from Spotify to Soundflower, and then you would need to tell OBS that Spotify's source was Soundflower. So you're basically taking it, instead of sending it to the earbuds or your headphones or your speakers, you're sending it to Soundflower, and then then OBS is receiving it from Soundflower, and then that becomes like another source that you have in here. And then there are some additional options that are worth checking out. And this one hung me up for a while. You often need to go into the advanced audio properties and you need to set the audio monitoring on or off. Again, a little pro tip for you. If you're doing live streaming, most services allow you to broadcast privately. So you can broadcast to your own Facebook page, just to you. So you're the only person that can see it. I think YouTube lets you do a private session where you can broadcast privately. So I would encourage you to play around with this. If this is something you want to do, play around with this, and then you can just see how it records. So just to share a scenario that I ran into was I tried to bring in a friend of mine. I'm going to switch this back to this. I tried to bring in a friend of mine via Zoom. I do a YouTube channel with a friend, and I wanted to do Zoom. And I know people who have live casted Zoom before. You can probably already, based on what we've talked about, you can imagine how you would do that with this. You could register Zoom as a window. So that's one of the things you can pick a window. So you can say, I think I'd like to show this because I think it's easier to see it. You can go in here and you can say window capture, and then you can add an existing thing. So what I was doing before with that Keynote picture-in-picture thing, I had registered that as a source, but let's pick something else. Let's pick Google Docs, right? In case you wanted to do Google Slides or something. So you can click OK, and then you would pick the window. And what you can see here is it's listing all of my windows that I have been working with, or that I have open. And so I look at Google Chrome, and then I've got Google live stream seminar notes. Okay, so now I'm only broadcasting that window right now, and you can see me scrolling through that. And so now I have that as one of my sources in this particular scene, and I can resize that thing, right? So it can be, I can crop, as I mentioned before, so I can, basically I don't need to see any of that stuff. I don't I just want the document. So you can basically bring it in like this, and it looks okay. It looks it doesn't look that bad, right? Like it's fine. So again, there are a number of different ways that you can approach this. And if you didn't want it again, I could just easily say, okay, let's click Google Docs. We'll pull that out. Yes. And we're going to pull out Spotify as well. And then I'm going to switch back to this. Okay, so we've covered a number of different things right now, but that's a lot about OBS. Again, I just want to remind you, don't do this the day before, like you're going to do your broadcast. This is a thing that you need to practice with a little bit and get comfortable with. There are a couple of other options out there. There is another version of OBS is open source, and so a company called Streamlabs created one. Somebody just flagged this to me right before I did this. I haven't had a chance to use it, but supposedly it has a better UI. It's only on Windows, so if you're on Windows and you want to give that a try, it's probably worth checking out. There's a software called Ecamm Live, which has a really nice interface and lets you do a lot of this stuff. I've also found that it's pretty good at finding different cameras that often don't show up on operating systems. So Ecamm Live is good, but it is a subscription-based platform, so you have to pay monthly. So again, just a couple of things to keep in mind. I want to talk about equipment in just a minute and share a little bit about my own equipment before I wrap up. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention that a consideration in terms of community engagement. So I mentioned that this is a simple way to go, and it is, but keep in mind that if people are joining and thumbs up or asking comments, you're only seeing a very few of those at a time if you're on your phone. And so a friend of mine just did this and basically went the route of wanting to do it on their laptop so that they could see more of that feedback, so that they could answer those questions, so that they could essentially respond as they needed to. And so it ended up being really a good way to go, a good option for them to use that. So just a thing to kind of keep in mind as you're considering this. The other thing is, if you're engaging with people online, it's often good to have a moderator. So when you're on Facebook Live, for example, you can see people's comments, you can see when people join, when people liked. That's a pretty good experience. When you're on YouTube, for example, sometimes you can get anybody who's on YouTube that will come. I mean, I know that you can hide it and make it unlisted, so that can help. But a lot of times people can jump in and it's hard. The comments can get a little bit spicy. So what I would encourage is it's good to, again, if you're expecting a large audience, I would encourage you to get somebody to help moderate that. If you're expecting just a small number of people, like maybe between 20 to 30 people watching, maybe even a little bit more than that, it's something that perhaps one person can handle, but you generally want somebody that's there. A lot of these live stream platforms also will allow you to set your moderation preferences so that you can say, like, there's a delay, or you can whitelist words. There is just another option. If you're expecting a large audience, one of the things that I found helpful is there's an app called Slido, which I've seen used at large conferences to good effect. One of the things that I saw it used and I thought was especially neat was I was at a company who was doing one of their employee. They have thousands of employees, and so they were doing like a webinar to all their employees, but then they had Slido. And Slido, for those that haven't used it before, it lets you basically jump in and ask questions or post a comment or something like that. And the benefit of that is, number one, you can take anonymous questions. They have pretty robust moderation options. The other nice thing about it is that people can anonymously upvote comments or questions. So, for example, in this scenario with the company, they said, does anybody have questions? And so, or employees, leave your questions here. And so an employee might leave a question about healthcare and, or health insurance, and like 25, 30 people are upvoting that. And so that basically gets bubbled up to the top. And so then the employees are able to the executives were able to look at that and say, oh, okay, this is the question that we need to be answering. So it was kind of a neat scenario. I also know another company that is doing this for a big conference that they're hosting. They are doing it via YouTube. They had considered using Zoom. Zoom has a webcasting feature with actually some pretty cool things where you can have people like raise their hands and that kind of thing. But I believe they have a cap of like 1,000, and so they were expecting 900 for their conference, and so they thought like we don't want to bump into that limit. So they ended up going with YouTube, and the other nice thing about YouTube is they were able to essentially schedule it, and then if you go to that page, it'll say like in 2 days, 5 minutes, and whatever, this live stream will begin. So it's a nice place for people to go to leave up so that it's there, set and ready to go. Whereas something like Facebook Live won't pop up. You can schedule it, but the scheduling experience is not that great. I had problems with it even tonight trying to get it set up, and you have to go like edit a draft in order to like see if your stream is working. It's a weird experience. Probably something I'm sure they're working on, but just a thing to be mindful of. And what's nice, again, they really take that YouTube. They're going to have people calling in via Zoom. Zoom has actually connectivity directly with YouTube. I think it's on the Zoom side. You can basically say we're going to broadcast live, and then you put those stream keys from YouTube into your Zoom, and then Zoom can talk to it. Not sure if that's a paid feature, but what that allowed them to do is let them basically drop in this embedded YouTube player where the live stream is going to be, and put in a Slido chat on the right-hand side so that they could have this video playing, and people would be able to like essentially post questions to the people, because it's going to be professionals speaking and like a kind of a teaching conference, TEDx sort of setting. So again, there's a number of different things to consider and ways that you can engage with the community. Okay, let's talk about equipment for just a minute. So those of you that know me know that I have posted recently about my setup. I'll share a link about this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to post several links to plasticmind.com/live streaming -101. Live streaming -101. I'll try to put the link in the description so that you can get it there. But I've written up my whole setup here. I've got pictures. I've got like my breakdown. I will run through it real quickly here. It might be a helpful thing for people who are trying to figure out how to get a nice external camera set up. Basically what I'm doing is I'm using a DSLR. I've got a Sony a6000 that I got cheap on Facebook Marketplace. I tried using a Canon M50, which is Canon's mirrorless, but I had lots of issues with it because, for example, you can't use autofocus because it would be putting a box around my face as it's trying to figure out autofocus. There's just a number of issues that I had with it. So I ended up like sending all of that back, and then just got this, and it's been great. It's worked great out of the box from day one. I have it set on the video mode. That was another thing. I had it set on picture mode, trying to set the aperture and all that stuff. If I set it onto video mode, it's a much better experience, and it's much smoother. And I think it even exports 4K, which is great because I actually send the audio. I plug into there's a micro HDMI that I plug into the side, and that runs down into an Elgato Cam Link, which the Elgato Cam Link is basically an HDMI on one side and a USB on the other. And when you plug it into your computer, anything that comes into that, it just says, hey, I'm a camera. So you could plug in your Switch, you could plug in anything that you want that can spit out to HDMI, that will show up as a camera. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the output of my Sony DSLR, running it down into the Elgato Cam Link, and so basically my computer thinks, hey, we've got a camera here. Another thing that I forgot to mention on the Facebook stream is that in order to get this to work, you can technically be swapping batteries. I don't know what the battery life is on this. I actually got a dummy battery, which the dummy battery, basically you plug it in, and then it's got, you stick it in where you would normally put a battery, but then it's got a place where you plug in, and that runs to the wall. And so you have basically endless, time. I've left this on for about 8 hours straight, and it's fine. I worry about the sensor overheating and stuff like that, and not wanting to hurt the life of my camera, but it's been fine. It's run for a long time, and it's been great. One other important thing is lighting is really important. You don't have to get too crazy with this. There are a lot of things you can do. The key is just get your face lit up really nicely. Not so much that it's blown out. I know a lot of people have their like big, overhead light, and their face, they just get all washed out and stuff. So I would encourage you to get some nice directional lights. I use these. This is Teotronics. It's like a desk lamp kind of thingy, and it's got this thing. And what's great about that is during the day I keep it down like this. Can I get it in frame? I get it down like this, but then when I want it to illuminate my face, I just boom, pop it up, and it lights me up. Now, again, that's probably less helpful to you since Amazon has suspended all service except for essentials. But if you can find something like that that's going to hit you in the face directionally, it can be really helpful. Lastly, I would say don't skimp on audio. The phones are good because they're made to pick up voice, and so they're great. But what a world of difference if you can get your hands on a decent microphone. I would say this one is good. This Rode Podcaster, I don't want to go too far down the road. This is good, but it's the volume's kind of low. You have to get real close to do that, and that's okay. I have a Yeti was much cheaper, and it picks up a lot more. It's got more gain. The reason that I like this is because it's very echoey in my office, and so it doesn't pick up a lot of that echo, especially when I'm up nice and close. Okay, so those are some of the equipment that I use. Somebody had asked me on the other thing, can you stream using 2 cameras? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm going to come into OBS and I'm going to drop in another video capture device, and I'm specifically going to capture my IMAX FaceTime camera. So I'm going to create that as a source. I'm going to select that and click OK. And now you can see I've got 2 videos that are running here. And this can be super helpful. As you can imagine, let's say you want to teach people how to draw. I actually just talked with somebody on my remote co-working sessions that I've been doing every day. I met somebody who has a camera set up facing down, and then they have another one facing them. And so what they can do is they can, they have a scene set up, one that's just down, one that's just their face, one that's like a picture-in-picture, like this. All the stuff that we talked about with Keynote and slides, you could do the same thing with another camera source. And then I don't need to bring in the audio from that because I've got this audio, right? And so I get 2 video sources, but only a single audio source. So it can be helpful. And the other thing is you can kind of see the video quality here. This is the iMac 5K, I think it is. Forget which year, 2015, 2016, something like that. And so it's not bad, it's decent, but you can just see you get a little bit nicer blur here, and the depth of field is a little bit better. So it's nice. And the other thing that I want to point out too is that, going back to what I said at the beginning, is that the audio quality is so much less important than you being comfortable in front of this. I was lucky enough to have set this whole setup up probably like a month ago before any of this, became a big deal. So it's not like I set this all up for, everybody working from home. So I'm pretty comfortable with this setup, but it took a little bit of getting used to. And there were a couple of days I was like ready to throw it out the window. So, give yourself a little bit of slack. If you're not figuring it out, it's fine. Okay. A couple of other things just to mention. I mentioned broadcasting. If you're broadcasting multiple streams, there's a bandwidth cost. I do want to talk quickly about pre-recording and recording. One of the things that you can do if you have really bad bandwidth, which I know some people really have struggled with that, and it's laggy and it almost feels embarrassing when you're trying to do kind of a streamed event. One of the things that you can do is you can pre-record and upload, right? And that's fine. But if you still want to have the real-time feel to it, like a church service especially, people like to have making comments during, or, sometimes people have a question and you can respond in the comments. So sometimes if you want to still have that, but it's too laggy and you're just nervous that that bandwidth is not going to hold, there's a couple things that you can do. One is you can pre-record and upload, right? You're not going to get the synchronized experience. You can pre-record and send it to somebody with better bandwidth. And then one of the things that they can do is they can broadcast it live. So one of the things that you can do with OBS is, as you see this, you can actually point to a video file, and you can actually have a video file play as one of your scenes. And so you could basically set up all of your videos ahead of time, and you can just basically click through those as scenes. So you could start with maybe a countdown video, or a blank screen, or a screen with your organization's logo on it. And then you could kind of just basically bam, bam, bam through them. And then, you get the benefit of a nice live feeling experience. And you can then again, if you're just one person doing all of this, you can pre-record this, have it all set up, be clicking through the scenes, and then be responding to those live stream, people, comments, questions, whatever. So that might be a nice option for you if your bandwidth is really low, or you're just nervous about it cutting out midway through. So again, just some options to consider. I did also want to mention Mac and PC have different things. So Streamlabs, as I mentioned before, is supposedly a better version of OBS, but it's only for Windows. So what I typically do is, if I was looking for a virtual camera and I found a Windows one, but I was like, nah, I need it for the Mac. So I just basically, Googled for a Mac version of whatever that is. And sometimes you'll find it and get lucky. Or, again, if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Plastic Mind. You can also ping me on Facebook, Plastic Mind there as well. I'm Plastic Mind pretty much everywhere. And so I want to end with a couple of quick things just to mention. Number one, I want to reiterate what I've said all the time through, and that is, don't let what equipment you have limit you or limit your desire or willingness to stream. Don't let that be the thing that keeps you from streaming. I know plenty of people who, I know several good-sized churches that just didn't stream because they weren't comfortable with it. And it's listen, throw a phone up there, talk to people. It's okay. We're human beings. We're in this together. It's fine. Which actually kind of ties to the other thing I want to mention, and that is imperfection is fine. We're all human beings. It's okay to be intimate in this day and age. Sometimes it's good. I was just filming, my kids have this YouTube channel, and I was just filming with them, and my wife, or my daughter, was dumping out cornstarch. She's making this stuff for kids to play with. So she dumps out the cornstarch, and it shoots out, misses the measuring cup, and lands on the table. And she just got oh no, we have to start again. And I was like, no, this is so great. This is the best kind of stuff. It just lets people know that you're a normal human being. It's great. And my son, after that happened, he was my little 5-year-old was it pooped, or it poofed. But it sounded like he said it pooped, and it was just the funniest thing. It was so great. And so I just had to tell the kids, I was like, look, it's good for people to be reminded that you're imperfect. It's good to be reminded of that. It's healthy. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. And the next one is always assume that you're live. There's usually some kind of a delay after you shut it off. If you were here for the beginning of the video, you probably saw me going, because I didn't know that that when I clicked go live, even though I had 7 seconds at the beginning that were still streaming over to YouTube, when I click live, it was oh, we're actually going to take whatever is coming right now and we're going to broadcast that. So always assume that you're live. Don't be the woman who was on the Zoom call in the bathroom. Just be mindful of that there's some kind of a delay after you shut it off. If your lens cap is not on or your camera is not covered, you don't want to get caught. The other thing that related to this as well, don't be afraid to mute the video and audio. If you're just one person presenting, you obviously want to be on all the time. But if you're doing something with multiple people, don't be afraid to mute it. That way if a dog barks or something like that, you're not freaking people out. There is an app that I use called Shush for the Mac. I like to mention it because enough people haven't heard of it, and it's just a game changer for me. Basically, what happens is it lets you map your function key. It lets you map that as a mute button, a global mute button, so that you can press that, and you've muted everything. And this is great because I cough a lot. Especially in the wintertime, I get like asthma. And so I'm constantly coughing, and it was really annoying in meetings. So I've gotten really good where I'll be, and I'm able to mute it as I'm coughing. So it's a helpful thing. I'm not sure if there's a Windows complement to that. There is a shortcut, for example, like in Zoom, lets you shortcut. But the nice thing about something like this is it lets you globally do that. You can also toggle so that it's always on, and then you mute, or it's vice versa where it's always off and you press it to talk, and then you just double tap in order to invert it, right? So it's a great helpful tool to use. Okay, I don't know if there's anything else that I've missed. If you have any questions, please ping me on Twitter. I'll answer them as best I can. There's a couple of people that I know that do this more often and probably better than I do that I can put you in touch with if you have more advanced, complicated needs. But I think, one last thing. I should have mentioned this before. If you wanted animations for your presentations, PowerPoint, there's an OBS plugin for PowerPoint that lets you run PowerPoint in a window. I don't think there's something for Keynote, but I do think that there is a thing specifically for PowerPoint where you can run it in a window as if it's presentation mode, and then you can capture just that, and then you could have your animations and things like that. So it might be a useful thing for those of you that use PowerPoint. Thanks so much for joining. Hopefully it was helpful. Again, if I've said anything wrong, call me out on it. I'm new to this too. I think we're all trying to figure it out. And so I thought I'd just share some stuff and hopefully it'll be helpful. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.